From Forbes breaking news, Wesley Hunt mocks Pelosi's act of kneeling in Kente cloth during tear, slamming Rona restrictions. And that was just beyond parody, right? You would have thought that was AI or something. Her and Chuckle Schumer kneeling in Kente cloth. It just made no sense. Who did they think they were winning over with that? But let's see what Wesley Hunt has to say about it here.
Conspiracies to voting conspiracies. I just want to have unanimous consent to introduce an article entitled Trump Politicized Mail-in Voting in 2020, but it came to Pennsylvania with strong Republican support.
Without objection.
Thank you.
I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues on the left keep telling me about how Donald Trump is a fascist and how they think he's the next Mussolini. And what we experienced during the pandemic from Democrat governors and local leaders with their hypocritical and unscientific policies is the closest thing you'll ever see to fascism in the history of this country. They told...
Absolutely, right? We saw it across the board. Cuomo and Newsom quite clearly were just, they were drunk on power. And I don't know, this guy, Wesley Hunt here, he doesn't get a lot of press, but how come the left doesn't go after him constantly? Oh, black Republican, he's a fascist, he's a racist, he's the blackface of white supremacy, it's internalized racism. We don't hear too much about that, and it sounds like he's about to go absolutely ham on Rona restrictions.
They told us to stay in our homes. They told us not to go to church. They told us not to attend.
And it looks like there's going to be some more poster board behind. When that comes out, they're going to absolutely rake some of these weirdo Democrats over the coals, which is great, but they will never face consequences.
Funerals and only leave our homes for what they deemed to be essential travel. And when we rightly questioned the efficacy of their decrees, they told us to trust the science. Well, I'm about to show you what real fascism looks like. I'm about to show you what...
Trust the science, they say, right? It's been said 100 times over, 1,000,000 times over, but the same trust the science crowd told you, wear a mask, get 2 shots, get 3 shots, whatever it is. But they also wanted you to believe that a man could magically become a woman. And they also wanted you to believe that that very same man that now became a woman could get pregnant. That's the trust the science people.
Their science really looks like. During the pandemic, something struck me. People weren't allowed to use jogging or biking trails, even in my hometown of Houston, Texas. And speaking of Houston, our Democrat mayor ordered around 500 basketball nets removed from public courts because, God forbid, anyone have any fun outside to get essential vitamins.
Wow. I didn't know this guy was from Houston, right? And I didn't know that... I kind of knew that Houston, I guess, is a weird bastion of blue politics and big red Texas, but it's better than being in a Republican part of California, I'd say, because at large, Houston and Dallas, maybe even the mayor of Dallas, I believe, actually switched parties and became a Republican. But that aside, the people at large largely are just not going to go for it, right? So yeah, maybe there's a Democrat because, they did a bunch of ballot harvesting or something. I don't know exactly why, but overall, the people of Texas just aren't going to stand for it, right? And I would also make the argument that now, after living through the past 3 or 4 years, the Democrats are going to stand even less of a chance in Houston, Texas. That is, of course, if voting is real, but that's a different story.
Fresh air. Skate parks were filled with sand in California, so people couldn't play outside and again get fresh air. In Malibu, paddleboarders were arrested for the crime of paddleboarding alone.
She's loving it. Look at the lady. I forget her name. Hageman. She's absolutely loving it. She's like, based congresswoman or something, but she is just smiling and snickering over there. I absolutely love it.
In the middle of the ocean. However, one group of people were exempt from lockdowns from...
And I think she's from Wyoming, right? It's not what this is about, but it's pretty funny to watch her watch him, and she's just getting a kick out of it, as am I.
Mandates and apparently from the virus itself. Now, I'm of the opinion that this group of people should have their blood tested because who knows? Maybe they had the cure before we had the vaccine. And I think you know what group I'm talking about. That's right. I am talking about the righteous George Floyd protesters. According to one political article, these protesters risked their health and their life for, quote, the health of our nation. And do you remember those same health professionals telling us to stay home or else you're going to kill grandma? 1,000 of those same health professionals signed a letter saying, don't shut down protests using coronavirus concerns as an excuse.
Yeah. And I thought it was also funny. This is perhaps a little bit less talked about. But when I was in New York during Rona, the restaurants were closed. And, of course, they were like takeout only. But they were actively encouraging you to get a delivery. So think about that. If you wanted to go sit down in a restaurant, that wasn't safe. It was much safer to get one man, be a person, a they, them, zee, them, zer, between the chef and you. There's one dirty Brooklyn hipster on a bike riding through traffic to give you your food, and that was safer than sitting down at a restaurant. Absolutely ridiculous.
Interesting. As an excuse, people lost their jobs and their livelihood in this country because they chose not to take the vaccine. People weren't allowed into restaurants because they didn't show their vaccine papers. Their vaccine card. Our schools were shut down and our children were sent home. The result? Youth suicide rates increased dramatically.
Yeah, okay, I don't know about that. They always want to use the life and death. That's happening all over the place. But I also just anecdotally have to mention that, right, before anybody knew the name George Floyd, I was just protesting the lockdown because I wanted to go back to work with a dozen people, maybe 24 people, most of which were old enough to be my parents, waving little American flags, just saying we wanted to go back to work. That was in early May of 2020. Fast forward a month, and the entire world breaks into flames, and the Floyd rioters, the Floyd protesters, all with masks on now because they're still scared of Rona, apparently, were allowed to camp out at the very same park in Lower Manhattan, outside of City Hall, that I was arrested for protesting the lockdown. They blasted us with propaganda.
Don't follow unlawful. Non-essential gatherings of any kind have been prohibited by the governor and the mayor. This gathering is unlawful, and you are ordered to disperse. If you fail to disperse immediately, you are subject to arrest. This is the New York City Police Department.
Right? It's absolutely through the roof. So, it's the two-tier justice system in action, and we always talk about it. I'm always screaming about it, but it never gets old, and it's still absolutely amazing to watch somebody call this out on a more professional political level. And again, shout out to Hagman on the side there, who's absolutely loving it.
And children lost years of education that they'll never get back.
And that was part of it. And I just did another article about Newsom having the parent problem and some of these kids being 2, 3, 4 years behind. And as that's happening, he is forcing the radical gender agenda ideology on some of the school districts. Otherwise, he's threatening to fine them. So after you destroyed the learning curve and said, you know what? Doesn't even matter. Reading and writing is a little bit overrated. How about this book is gay? It'll teach you how to use Grindr and give a BJ. Much better.
Dr. Ladapo, thank you for being here, sir. Yes or no, in your professional medical experience and Harvard education, as the Surgeon General of Florida, are Democrats and liberals immune?
Whoa, Ladapo's there? Another common sense black dude from Florida that I think does get a little bit more hate than this Wesley Hunt guy, right? Oh, he's an extremist. Oh, there's measles in Florida, and the Surgeon General. They just jump through hoops. They do not want to hear anything. If any of it made sense, they could just argue it down, right? I can't believe I'm doing this, but defending Don Lemon when he was talking to cartel Katie Hobbs. And the people of Arizona are going to vote for me. And Don Lemon's like, well, if you believe what you're saying, then just go talk to her. But of course they don't.
Why not debate your opponent? If you believe your opponent has issues in the spreading conspiracy theories about a stolen election and so on, and it's not being truthful with the people of Arizona, why then not get on the debate stage and debate her?
Not only is Carrie Lake, has she centered her entire platform around this election denialism, I didn't want to give her a bigger stage to do that. But additionally, she has shown that she's not interested in having any kind of substantive conversation. She's only interested in creating a spectacle.
But
and I didn't want to be.
If you were in the same space with her, wouldn't it be easier to knock it down in front of everyone, in front of the most people? Because you're not stopping her from spreading whatever you believe that
You know,
she is spreading, by not debating her, she can go on television, she can talk about it, she can go in front of the people of Arizona every single day and talk about it, but you're not confronting her on it. And it seems like it would be an easy fix if you stood up on a debate stage and confronted her about these issues.
Look, we're 6 days out from the election, and our campaign strategy is our campaign strategy. So we're moving forward. I'm continuing to make my case to the voters of Arizona. Whether or not we debate it in this race is not going to decide this election.
And they know the machine will work for them. But let's see what Ladapo has to say here.
Immune to COVID-19?
No, sir, to the best of my knowledge.
A follow-up question to that. You set Florida's response to COVID-19.
Hang on, I want to go back and see what he asked him. I apologize. I'll do better here. But what did he ask Ladapo?
Yes or no, in your professional medical experience and Harvard education, as the Surgeon General of Florida, are Democrats and liberals immune to COVID-19?
No, sir, to the best of my knowledge.
A follow-up question to that. You set Florida's response to COVID-19, and how would you explain bodies not piling up in Los Angeles after the George Floyd protests?
For one, there was very, very, very little transmission outdoors. That was a major part. Most of the protesters, from what I saw, were young people that probably also contributed, but there was almost no transmission outdoors. And it broke my heart when they pulled the basketball hoops in the playgrounds that I was taking my kids to in Los Angeles. I mean, I could have,
Yeah, so there was very little transmission. I mean, well, it was all fake, right? It was all completely phony and fake. But there was very little transmission outdoors, which of course they knew because later in that very same year, in November of 2020, there was enough safety to celebrate in the streets, pulling your mask up and down, sharing champagne because Beau Biden had won.
An impromptu dance party broke out. Not much social distancing, but almost everyone wearing a mask. There were bands and champagne, costumes and tears.
I'm just so happy that Trump is going to be out of office.
I'll stop it there, but broke my heart.
Thank you for your response. Much like the vast majority of liberal policies, this rule's for thee and not for me, and apparently that also applies to COVID lockdowns and mandates. It was okay to make exceptions for when the left believes was their righteous cause. The left said it was safe for 100,000 people to protest, 100,000 people in the middle of a pandemic, but they were giving you grief for letting people sit on the beach or paddleboard in the middle of the ocean. Why? Because in the case of the George Floyd protest, it was a righteous cause in their opinion. And by the way, it wasn't just protest, it was rioting, it was looting, it was attacking and burning a police station in Minneapolis, it was rioting in front of the White House to such an extent that President Trump had to be ushered into a bunker. And all this was acceptable because it was deemed righteous by the left. Speaking of righteous causes, let's take a look at.
Is there? I hope there's Democrats in there. I wish Ladapo, whatever. He's not a politician. He's Surgeon General or whatever. Fairly based, I believe. But I wish he. I don't know. I got to find another video. Like we need to have some. I'm sure it's out there, right? Forbes Breaking News has thousands upon thousands of videos. But we need to have some Democrats answer for this absolution. And if nothing else, who was this for? You thought that Pelosi in a mask on her knee and a Kente cloth was going to convince all the black people in deep East Oakland or Compton or Flatbush, Brooklyn or the South Bronx that they were working for them? What?
I'm blickety black, blacker than black, black. I'm blacker than black, yo, because I'm black and I'm back.
Black Panther. I'm sorry, that's Kunta Kinte. I'm sorry, Nancy Pelosi, Wakanda forever. This is the absurdity of the COVID-19 lockdowns, liberal mandates, and of course, even a little cultural appropriations. This is very ridiculous. We must never allow something like this to ever happen again in this country. It's why we have a constitution in the first place, to protect us from the exact type of government overreach that we saw during the pandemic. No matter what side of the political aisle that you find yourself, you should always be on the side of freedom and preserving our rights via the Constitution. And that's why many of us walked away from the pandemic and the protests that followed, asking the question, were the COVID restrictions really about public safety or were they about winning an election? You decide. Thank you for being here.
It was absolutely about winning an election. I think we all know that. Well, that was part of it, right? It was a much larger worldwide takeover, and they know they can't really get away with that in 2024. So they're going to do all the Palestine protests, all the Stop Oil protests, all the migrants are going to take over. I mean, it's election year chaos all over again, and this was probably happening the entire time. I genuinely don't know. Maybe before Trump, I don't know if it happened during the Obama years, whatever. It's much younger at that point in time, not really paying attention. But it's quite clearly about winning an election. And the only thing, I mean, I hope to find more videos of this guy, or maybe even somebody else, just showing these pictures directly to the Democrats, or even Pelosi herself, or Schumer. Like, what were you thinking in this moment? So shout out to Wesley Hunt here, and Ladapo. And shout out to this lady. I think it's Haberman, something like that. But she was absolutely smirking and smiling the entire time, that we can just relive the insanity of those, protests. Because, of course, racial justice was far more important than staying safe by wearing a mask, because you could kill someone if you walk around Trader Joe's without it.